On the 22nd of December 2020, it was a normal Tuesday on the r/Yu-Gi-Oh! Discord server. Within the quiet scroll of the Marketplace channel, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Something that would solve a mystery that had lingered for nearly 15 years. At 9:35 AM, Discord user WeAndaFian would send a pretty simple and unassuming message. Can I get a price check on these? Parallel rares from MF03. What followed was a wave of disbelief. The server lit up with stunned reactions. Don't knows just don't exist. Yeah, if that's real, that's the first picture of Mattel Sidra I've seen. First I'm hearing or seeing of that card even existing. Mattel Cyber End is easy. This is something else. History in the making. Mattel Sidra is real. As expected, eagle-eyed collectors would meticulously scrutinize every inch of the photo for any inconsistencies with the card to prove it was fake, and they found nothing, except for one inconsistency. That sure is the Mattel Rarity, but wasn't it supposed to say EN10 instead of EN9? This revelation turned expected knowledge about the MF03 series of cards on its head, and as the story made its way to Reddit, Facebook, and eventually YouTube, the public narrative of this card took a life on its own. What followed was a whole saga full of lies, deceit, and misinformation in the court of a public opinion, one where perception quickly overpowered reality. This is the story of the hunt for MF03 Cyber Dragon. Wait, before you skip, trust me, you're going to want to stick around. It's kind of crazy that I'm saying this. Raid is partnering with none other than Paramount to bring the most radical crossover. Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, Michelangelo, April, and Shredder to the game as legendary champions, so you can live your nostalgic childhood fantasies. I'm most excited about Donatello. His support role and techie strategic style fit perfectly with the character, but honestly, all their designs look amazing. Starting August 21st to November 21st, you can kick off your TMNT collection in Raid Shadow Legends by logging in for 7 days to unlock Michelangelo, the legendary champion who debuffs enemies, taunts with trash talk, and dodges like a ninja. You can also fuse Donatello and summon others in limited time events, and challenge Shredder in a special dungeon to earn an exclusive Chronophage gear set. Collect all 6 TMNT champions for a special bonus reward, even better than pizza. What I love most about Raid is the endless amount of content it has, as there's always something new to do, but if you were to ask me what my favourite mode is, hands down it would be the PvE content. I'm still a small channel, so if you want to support me, download Raid using my link in the description or scan the QR code for insane bonuses. You'll get epic champion Tayrel, and another pack with epic Rector Drath after reaching level 15. And not just that, you can pick from 5 promo codes for the legendaries. I'd advise you to pick the promo code Desert Queen because of how Rarity can carry early on to even mid-game. These champions are available after downloading via my custom link or QR code only. Raid Shadow Legends is cross-platform, and you can play it anywhere on your mobile or PC, so please check it out. And thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. In the early 2000s, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was at peak mania, and it had a chokehold on children everywhere. To say that it was a beloved anime was an understatement to say the least. It could even contend with anime behemoths like Dragon Ball and Pokemon. Kids would beg their parents to hop over to Toys R Us, just for a shot at ripping open a new pack of fresh cards, hoping to pull their favourite monster. And like anything wildly popular with kids, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was ripe for rampant commercialization. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was everywhere. It was on TV after school, packed into cereal, printed on lunchboxes, and yes, even on soap. The result of one of these examples of merchandising was a partnership with Mattel. Mattel themselves were also a behemoth of the toy manufacturing industry, where they owned and produced some of the biggest toy franchises, including Barbie, Hot Wheels, and American Girl, just to name a few of the assets in their portfolio. This collaboration also spawned a variety of products, like a couple board games, a Flame Wingman Dragon Blast toy, a couple of really ugly mini toys, but most relevant to our story, the Mattel GX action figures. The production of these toys and promo cards was messy to say the least. To give some context about how sought after these cards, there have been numerous forum posts, whether that be on Facebook, Pojo forums, or Reddit, asking about these cards. The white whale of these cards would be the Cyber Dragon, but most people would just dismiss these cards as nothing more than mere rumors or urban legends. These were pretty good quality figures, in comparison to the quality of their previously made mini action figures. The toys were split into 2 categories, the deluxe figures and 360 joint figures. The deluxe figures included Flame Wingman, Thunder Giant, Water Dragon, Cyber End, and Wild Edge, with the rest of the normal figures being part of the line named 360 joint. The deluxe figures typically had some sort of gimmick associated with them, and on top of that also being a more premium and quality toy in comparison to the joint series. For example, the Water Dragon would have a hard plastic head and tail, but its body would be comprised of a soft rubber material, where you could fill it up with water and cause water to spurt out of the dragon's head. The lesser quality 360 joints that were released included Burstinatrix, Clayman, Sparkman, Blade Edge, Wingman, Bubbleman, Ancient Gear Golem, Cyber Dragon, Chiffonian Soldier, and Wing Karibo level 10. The 360 joints stood out for its mix and match feature, allowing you to swap the limbs of different figures. Each toy had a universal joint system, meaning you could, for example, attach Burstinatrix arm to Avian's body. Aside from this interchangeable joint mechanic, the figures were otherwise fairly standard action figures. Strangely, some of these toys that included this same joint swapping feature didn't carry the official joint branding, if they came packaged with promotional cards, which is where we start to see signs of trouble begin to appear. Seemingly for completely arbitrary reasons, the promo cards were split into 3 different sets: MF01, MF02, and MF03. For quite some time, this was the list. A loosely compiled catalogue of what collectors believed made up the MF series of promotional cards. It was a patchwork of scattered information, sourced from the back of box photos, old forum posts, and fading memories. But even then, things didn't quite add up. Take Thunder Giant for instance. Unlike the others, his card was labelled MF01, a number all on its own. The remaining deluxe figures were placed in MF02, and the standard 360 joint figures, their promos were labelled MF03. There was no consistent pattern, no obvious logic. But more than anything, the list had a problem. It wasn't entirely real. Many of the cards in the supposed set were missing. For years, cards like Ancient Gear Golem, Tempest, Clayman, and Cyber Dragon were whispered about, but never seen. Their existence was based on assumptions and educated guesses, not hard evidence. One example, MF03 EON003, supposedly is Clayman, but no such card had ever surfaced. It was simply assumed that because Burstinatrix was EN002 and Sparkman was EN004, then Clayman had to fall in between them. So what this list was just nothing more than a guess, as 7 of the cards were basically estimations as to what card number they were. Before it was revealed, Tempest was guessed to be MF01, EN002, but this was all really just assumptions and nothing concrete. Eventually, Tempest was found puzzlingly as a promo alongside Thunder Giant for a Flame Wingman figure, so we can confirm it as MF02 EN001, bringing down the number of missing cards from the MF series to 6. Why was the Tempest card found in a Wingman package and not as a toy, you might ask? Why did people guess that there existed a Black Cluster Soldier card in the GX series line of toys? The answer is pretty simple. These toys never actually existed, or at least, not in any official capacity. There's virtually no documented evidence that these figures were ever released to the general public. It's far more likely that the line was quietly cancelled before reaching distribution, explaining why sightings still haven't popped up even to this day. Yet, traces of their existence do remain. On the reverse side of certain released packaging, a checklist appears, displaying other figures from the supposed line. We would see names that we already knew existed like Bubbleman, Blade Edge, and curiously, Black Cluster Soldier and Tempest. It's this list more than anything that suggested these figures were intended for release. That's not to say these toys never surfaced at all, there were occasional fringe appearances. A prototype of Black Cluster Soldier was reportedly displayed at a toy fair in 2006, and an unpainted Black Cluster Soldier eBay listing has shown up time to time, and likely a production sample. Beyond that though, little evidence has emerged of the toys. Whilst this was never widely publicised, I've managed to obtain a pretty rare photo of this extremely elusive Tempest, which as far as I can tell has barely even been seen by the most knowledgeable of collectors. Beyond that, the only other information I was able to obtain about this toy was that it was sold in a private transaction, making the trail impossible to follow. As for why these cards never saw full production, no definitive explanation exists. In the early 2000s, detailed documentation for toy lines, especially those that were shelved, were rarely archived. Most of what we know has been assembled through educated guesses or anecdotal accounts. One prevailing theory is that the GX line simply didn't sell well enough to warrant continuing the production of the cancelled toys. By then, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series had peaked in popularity, and GX never quite managed to capture the same audience. So the toys, like Tempest and Black Cluster Soldier, remained prototypes, frozen somewhere in a production pipeline, another casualty of shifting trends and waning interest. There is, however, another layer to all of this, one that might further explain how these pieces resurfaced years later. but we'll get to that. There was also a bit of a hierarchy of rarity when it came to the different figures and toys. A lot of this can't truly be confirmed, but there was at least some sort of partnership with Sears, and the distribution of these toys in some capacity, whether that be specific toys that were only available at Sears, if certain toys with cards were only available from them, or something else entirely. As most of this information comes from scattered witness testimonies rather than official documentation, this would explain why certain toys or cards were rarer than others. If you look at a photo taken from Toys R Us in 2006, you'll see that none of the toys had a promo card packed in, which again doesn't really prove anything but may lead credence to the theory. Interestingly, distribution of these figures wasn't exclusive to the United States. Over time, figures paired with promo cards have surfaced in regions as far-flung as Brazil and Canada. This complicated the theory of a Sears exclusive partnership, raising more questions than answers about how these toys were actually circulated. Further evidence of inconsistency comes from the secondary market. A glance at listings reveals a stark divide between sets. Cards from MF01 and MF02 are relatively abundant, typically selling between $7 and $50. In sharp contrast, MF03 cards, especially the elusive ones, routinely list for thousands of dollars, with far fewer available. The most likely explanation lies in the scale and method of release. MF01 and MF02 cards were clearly produced in higher quantities. They were consistently sold with their corresponding deluxe toys, sometimes even bundled in value packs, like one offering the MF02 card, 2 booster packs, and a spell card the last day of which, for $9.99. MF03, on the other hand, appears to have been strictly limited to figures, with no record of them being sold through alternate packaging or promotional bundles. The difference in packaging and distribution likely accounts for the extreme scarcity of MF03, and why some of its cards, like Cyber Dragon, have gained a near mythical status. Another key part of the puzzle is a certain lawsuit that Konami was involved in 2008. Around that time, strange products started to circulate on store shelves, with bundles containing booster packs and a handful of promo cards. People quickly noticed something was off, and that many of these cards appeared to be counterfeits. Many of the cards in these products looked wrong. The printing quality, the foil patterns, even the Eye of Anubis in a corner. Something didn't add up. Konami eventually began an investigation, and soon after filed a lawsuit against one of these stores selling these products, operating under the assumption that the store itself was producing unlicensed merchandise and fake cards. So that's the end of the story, right? Not quite. As it turned out, the store wasn't responsible at all. The real culprit was far more shocking. It was Upper Deck. For those of you unaware of who they were, they basically controlled the handling of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG outside of Japan. This meant that things like tournaments and distribution of cards to stores were all under control of Upper Deck. This was a bombshell, as it meant that the company that Konami had trusted control and was in partnership was basically performing secret backdoor deals to skim off extra money on top. Eventually, Upper Deck were forced to cease all operations of Yu-Gi-Oh! Merchandise, where Konami would hold full control over Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide even to this day. So what does that have to do with the toys? Well, given what we know about Upper Deck's behavior, it's not hard to imagine that they were involved in some other shady practices. It's entirely plausible that Upper Deck orchestrated side deals involving toy promos, perhaps cutting Konami out entirely. While the cards themselves may have been printed legally, the deal behind them might not have been. In fact, there is evidence to support this theory. To this day, Konami refuses to acknowledge the existence of these MF promo cards. They're absent from the official card database, despite other Upper Deck counterfeits appearing in the database. And here's the most important part. Every MF card was printed in parallel rare, a foiling that's notoriously easy to replicate. If Upper Deck wanted to sneak extra cards into circulation, or forge unlicensed promos, the MF cards would have been a perfect way to do it. What we do know for certain is that all 17 cards were planned for release at some point, though whether all of them physically exist is an entirely different question. Evidence for this again came from the packaging itself. Some of the toy boxes included a checklist, and on that list were all 17 cards, including the 6 previously missing ones, and most notably, a confirmation that Blackluster Soldier was indeed part of the MF lineup. Frustratingly, the checklist didn't reveal the card numbering though. So to summarize, we have 17 total toys and cards that were confirmed to be in production at some point, with 2 toys, one that seemingly never went past the prototype phase, the Tempest that was full on completion, packaged inside a box with its card, and has been sparsely sold on the black market. And of the cards, 6 remain missing. What adds intrigue to the cards isn't just their scarcity. After all, there's plenty of other one-of cards that exist. The difference between the MF cards and other rare cards like Tayrel the Great Warrior is that at least we have seen images of the cards, and have knowledge that without a doubt, Tayrel the Great Warrior exists. Hell, you could even say that MF03 was rarer than Anime Blue Eyes, because at least Kaiba had all 3 copies. but with cards like MF03 Cyber Dragon, there was never even an indication they existed past a single checklist containing a promise that would never be fulfilled. That is, until December 22nd, 2020. A user by the name of Ween Nafin, or later identified as Kevin Lee, would watch a video from Ruxin34, where he opened a pack of Mattel Raiders. This video wasn't particularly anything interesting, but it would spark something in Kevin. Curious to see what he might have lying around, he decided to go through his own collection. While digging through old boxes, Kevin came across his 15-year-old binder that hadn't been touched in years. Flipping through the pages, he came across a set group of cards that had caught his eye, a small group of cards with a strange folding pattern that he hadn't seen before. Intrigued, he began looking up the card codes one by one. All 6 were from the elusive MF03 series. Burstinatrix alone was valued at over $1,000, but what truly shocked him was that 3 of the 6 cards had no listings anywhere. No sales, no history, and as far as the internet was concerned, they didn't exist. Realizing what he had, Kevin first posted the images of the cards onto Reddit, and then 40 minutes later, he shared the same image on Discord. The photo revealed 6 MF03 parallel rares: Avion, Burstinatrix, Clayman, Sparkman, Bubbleman, and Cyber Dragon. This was a groundbreaking discovery, as it confirmed not 1, not 2, but 3 whole cards that were previously thought to be missing. While Burstinatrix, Sparkman, and Bubbleman had been seen before, albeit rarely, the inclusion of Avion, Clayman, and Cyber Dragon weren't even thought to exist as a card. Naturally, this led to disbelief in the Discord, with users almost immediately understanding the significance of this historical photo. A lot of skeptical messages were made, asking for better angles of the cards, and it passed the smell test. There weren't any glaring issues, the parallel foiling, the card text, there was nothing off with the card. If it was a fake, it was one of the most convincing anyone had ever seen. But one user, Sanchan, noticed a detail that no one else had pointed out. Wasn't it supposed to say EN10 instead of EN9? This was a massive bombshell that invalidated the current knowledge of the MF03 series of cards and casted doubt on the current working knowledge of the cards. According to all prior assumptions, Cyber Dragon was supposed to be MF03 EN010, but here it was, clearly marked as EN009. And when we look closer at the other newly revealed cards, more inconsistencies start to line up. Clayman was right where we guessed, but Avion appeared in the slot that Winkribo level 10 was, which honestly made way more sense in hindsight. Like I mentioned earlier, the list was always more of an approximation than a fact, nothing more than an estimate. For starters, it completely disregards Avion for some reason, and is nowhere on the list, despite there being as much evidence that it existed as the other missing cards. Considering its connection to the other normal elemental heroes, it would make the most sense for Avion to take the first slot on the list. With this new information in hand, the community was able to propose a more accurate version of the MF03 list, one that reorders the cards based on this latest discovery. Cyber Dragon essentially bumped Black Cluster Soldier off of slot EN009, and a revised list began to take shape. The current modern working list now correctly completed the hero lineup of MF cards, and removed any incorrectly made previous assumptions, so Black Cluster Soldier, Winkribo level 10, and Ancient Gear Golem were off the list, now leaving EN008 and EN10 vacant. If I was to guess, then presumably Winkribo would be EN10, Ancient Gear Golem filling up EN008, and Black Cluster Soldier filling up EN012. But until another Kevin comes along, it's all conjecture. Moving back to events of the server, Kevin himself didn't seem to be as aware of the magnitude of the cardboard gold he had, asking questions like, am I the first to post a pic of Cyber Dragon? With some users claiming that the card's worth could even reach up to 100k if he played his cards correctly, or even afford a down payment on a house. Needless to say, Kevin was quickly becoming aware of how sought after the 6 cards he had were. Fast forward to January 6th, 2021. Kevin revealed that he had submitted all 6 of the MF03 cards for grading through PSA. The results were mixed. Clayman came back with a 3, Avion scored an 8, and Cyber Dragon received a 6. Obviously a 6 for Cyber Dragon and a 3 for Clayman weren't ideal grades, but considering the sheer rarity of these cards, likely one of ones, the condition wasn't the main focus. What mattered was that they were graded. What stood out most, though, was Kevin's intent. He didn't appear to be especially attached to the cards from a collector standpoint, and if there's one clear reason why somebody would go through the trouble of grading a set of undocumented cards, it's the sell now. Kevin announced that he'd be auctioning off his cards in a dedicated Discord server on January 15th. The stand-up pieces, Cyber Dragon, Clayman, and Avion would be sold directly through the server. The other 3 less exciting cards, Burstinatrix, Sparkman, and Bubbleman, were originally slated for eBay listings, though in the end, Bubble Man never made it to eBay and was instead added to the Discord auction as well. But before we get into the auction, we need to talk about another key figure within our story. Through Kevin's own self-admission, he wasn't very familiar or intimate with Yu-Gi-Oh since he was a child, and with him revealing his cards on Reddit, he was setting himself up to be a prime target for any scammers or resellers attempting to make a quick buck by buying the card. He needed the advice and help from someone in the Yu-Gi-Oh community who had nothing to gain from the sale. Someone who wasn't trying to flip the card or get in on the profits, just someone who understood the space. That particular person was someone by the name of Dan Parker. If the name doesn't sound familiar, chances are you've still come across his work. If you've ever searched up literally anything related to Yu-Gi-Oh, there's a good chance you've ended up on his website, or a page he helped to build. Dan's fingerprints are all over Yu-Gi-Oh's infrastructure, Yugipedia, Dueling Network, Yu-Gi-Oh organization. He either helped run them, founded them, or shaped them into what they were today. To put it simply, if Yugipedia is the Library of Alexandria of Yu-Gi-Oh, Dan Parker is the librarian, the architect of the archives and responsible for the record keeping of so much vital knowledge for Yu-Gi-Oh as we know it today. Dan Parker is as close as you could get to the ideal middleman to help with the process of the cards. He had a good reputation in the community, the necessary contacts with help on the grading, and also had no motive to make money. So Kevin trusted him on his advice for key decisions, and so together they created the very aptly named Cyber Dragon Auction Discord server. Inside there were 8 total channels, 4 channels for information about the cards, Q&A channel, 1 for general discussion, a channel outlining the overall process, and most importantly, a bids channel where the actual auctions would take place. The card channels themselves were pretty uninteresting, with nothing really of note. There were clearer pictures of the cards to check for any imperfections the cards might have had, and information about the logistics of sending the cards over. Inside a question and answers channel, Kevin would give answers to commonly asked questions, such as how he acquired the cards, who gave them to him, and why he decided to wait 15 years to open them up again. According to Kevin, the MF03 cards were part of a larger set of cards he received as a birthday gift in elementary school, from a friend of his who he no longer remembered. The reason for the lack of recall would be due to the huge craze of Yu-Gi-Oh at his school, so there wouldn't be many people he could narrow it down to. He would place the cool hollow cards into a binder, and then forget about them for 15 years, until he stumbled across them after watching a Yu-Gi-Oh video about expensive cards. He would attempt to find a worth of the MF03 cards, but found no info on Cyber Dragon. And this is what brings us to seeing Kevin make the post on Reddit and Discord and lead to the events of the auction. And the general chat was just a place where people could discuss the auction and casually flex their cards, like this Tayrel the Great Warrior. For 3 days, the server transformed into something like a digital coliseum. People poured in, not just bidders, but spectators, skeptics, and collectors. Everyone in the community was eager to see how much the cards went for. It didn't matter if you're a casual fan, to the big name Yugi tubers like Simo, MBT, or even Rookson34, the very person who sparked the entire thing. Everyone wanted a front row seat to watch the chaos unfold. Here's how the bidding process worked. Everyone had access to the Discord server, but to actually place bids in the bids channel, you had to get verified. There are 2 ways to become verified and get access to bid. To place a bid, you had to be verified, either by sending an image of your ID along with proof of funds, or by being someone Kevin or Dan personally trusted. The verification process was designed to prevent trolls or fake bids coming through. Only serious offers were allowed. Once a bid stood unchallenged for 30 minutes, the auction would be declared over and a card would be sold. And so, on January 15th at 4:15 PM PST, the auction for the rarest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh history began. Clayman was the first card to be sold, with the opening bid coming in at $500. The bids kept climbing, $1,000, $1,200, $1,300, $1,600, $2,100, all the way up to $2,500. And then deleted user made the biggest jump yet with a $3,000 bid. Freedom07 fired back immediately with $4,000. The bidding war showed no signs of slowing down. $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. The numbers kept soaring until Freedom07 pushed the bid all the way up to the magic $10,000 mark. This number seemed to silence the competition, washing out the lesser bids as the clock ticked toward the 30-minute checkpoint. But with just 1 minute to go, 29 minutes into the countdown, that big goldfish swooped in with a last-minute snipe, $10,500. This was clearly past lead user's max bid for Clayman, as exactly 30 minutes later, Kevin would announce that big goldfish as the winner. And just like that, the first of the 3 cards had been sold. Next up was Avion, where this time it was mainly a battle between Hollow TWW, deleted user Nubs0948, and Man in the Shad. From 2,000, 3,000 to 5,000 this time, the bids were more spread out apart. With a bid of $8.5k, Man in the Shad decided to battle out. leaving 3 contenders. The bidding moved on: $9,000, $9,100, $9,500, and then Nubs pushed it to the $10K mark. That big goldfish tried the same last minute move as before, dropping a $10,500 bid with just 2 minutes to spare. But this time, Nubs was ready. With a quick counter, they bumped it up to $1,100. And just like that, the second card was sold. As a quick aside, Bubble Man was also auctioned off shortly after the Avian sale, but this one didn't generate nearly as much excitement, mainly because many more copies of the card exist, making it far less rare than the others. The only real highlights? MBT threw in a bid, and despite the card's lower profile, and just like that, we were on to the main prize fight of the entire event, the one card that everyone had been waiting for. Compared to Clayman and Avian, this card wasn't just rare. Cyber Dragon inherently was just more of an iconic card compared to Avian and Clayman. Everyone knew it. Everyone wanted this card, and in this auction, it was the main dish of the course, the crown jewel of the lineup, the card people had speculated about, argued over, and stayed up for, and now it was being sold. Almost immediately, that big goldfish swooped in with a staggering 10K bid, pretty much blowing past the 2 prices of the 2 previously sold cards. We would also see a new contender in the arena, with MF03 776 coming in with 15K and then pushing it further to 20K. From this point forward, it was a duel of the pockets between 2 people only, MF03 776 and a well too known deleted user. They waged war on each other, where MF03 776 once again broke another barrier with a bid of $30,000. From the permanent rampant outbids, the 30K bid would leave the battle to a standstill. That is, until the deleted user would then place the final bid at $30,500. And 30 minutes later, the rarest card in Yu-Gi-Oh history was officially sold. So that's the end of the story, of how 3 of Yu-Gi-Oh's rarest cards found hidden away in a random closet for 15 years, and eventually were revealed and sold without a problem, right? But well, there's one key aspect of the story I've been neglecting to tell. Following the initial hype from the discovery of the cards, there was a growing faction of the community that was becoming more and more distrusting of the authenticity of the cards. And there was a lot of controversy surrounding the discovery of the cards and the entire process that people were becoming distrusting of. A lot of people were very suspicious of Kevin's story, and to them, a lot wasn't lining up. For starters, the story of how Kevin acquired the cards seemed a little too convenient. According to him, he received the cards as a birthday gift roughly 15 years ago, from a friend whose name he no longer remembered, during a time when Yu-Gi-Oh was at the height of its popularity in schools. It's not an impossible scenario, but for many it felt suspicious. The lack of any concrete trace back to the original source meant that there was no way to validate the origin of these cards, and that ambiguity raised some red flags. There's also the matter of, assuming the story is true, how exactly his childhood friend would gift Kevin a pile of cards that were also in pretty good condition. That included 6 MF03 cards. As we know from the series, these cards were all only found packed in with the respective toys, which makes the situation even more unlikely. How does a child manage to convince their parents to buy them 6 different toys that were $10 to $20 each? The odds of requiring 6, especially when 3 have never been seen before, was statistically improbable. Even assuming this is true, there's another issue. If a kid did manage to get the toys and the respective cards from a store, there must have been other kids who brought these toys. So why hasn't Cyber Dragon, Clayman, or Burstinatrix appeared elsewhere? You also have to remember this. They clearly weren't close enough that Kevin would remember their name, so what kind of child at the height of the Yu-Gi-Oh craze was just handing out stacks of Yu-Gi-Oh cards to a friend that they weren't even that close with? To many deniers of the card, the story simply didn't line up, and the probability of it being true was pretty low, given how so many remarkable events had to line up. But that's not the only aspect that wasn't adding up about the cards. I previously mentioned that Kevin had them sent to be graded to a company called PSA. Kevin had the intent of selling his cards, and so with a high value card like MF03 Cyber Dragon, he would need to do 2 things: verifying the authenticity of the card and getting it graded. And the route that Kevin chose was not without controversy. Within a world of trading cards, there are the big 3 of getting cards graded: PSA, CGC, and BGS. PSA is by far the most recognizable of the 3, with any cards being graded by them fetching the highest price. CGC was seen as a more reputable company from PSA, but at that time, CGC didn't accept Yu-Gi-Oh! But with BGS, a card being graded by them just didn't fetch the same appeal that PSA had. Eventually, PSA was chosen. But this wasn't a popular decision with certain members of the community. PSA had notoriously acquired a certain reputation amongst people in the community due to previously grading fake Pokemon cards. This choice reflected badly on giving the community confidence in the card being real, and would further be ammo for the camp of the card being fake. There were repeated calls for the card to be verified by individuals outside of PSA, independent community figures or influencers within the misprint community, but those involved in the auction believed those requests were unreasonable. As Dan Parker would explain over Discord, people wanted the unreasonable layers. It's entirely unreasonable to delay everything, and also to trust the postal service to not damage or lose the card, risk getting postage, etc. To send it to a complete stranger so that he can look it up with a loop better than somebody else and mail it back. In other words, Dan had felt that Kevin was under his protection, and that he had a clear responsibility to make sure everything was 100% safe. This meant that sending a card potentially worth tens of thousands of dollars was a risk he simply could not take. And in fairness, it's hard to argue that mailing a one-of-a-kind card across the country just to satisfy internet skeptics is a low-stakes move. The risk of loss, theft, or even tampering was simply too high. This also wasn't just a case of blindly sending a card to PSA and hoping for the best. Dan personally reached out to known individuals within PSA, people he had established trust with, to ensure the card wouldn't be lost in the sea of bulk submissions. He wanted it looked over by multiple experienced graders, not a single low-level employee or intern, who could flag the card as suspicious simply because it was listed as MF03 010 in the database instead of MF03 009. PSA had even gone so far as comparing all 6 of Kevin's cards with other confirmed MF03 samples. Despite this careful planning, the real controversy didn't come from the grading. It came from the auction itself. Remember the deleted user who I mentioned earlier who was bidding on the Avian, Clayman, and eventually won the Cyber Dragon? Well, there's a certain reason why the Discord account behind those messages is now deleted. The auction was a scam. The mysterious bidder who aggressively competed for the Cyber Dragon wasn't just a random collector who had an interest in the card. That account belonged to a user by the name of Blue Oreo, a person Kevin knew personally. The way the auction was run had little faults. The process of verification, the bidding process, and the shipping of the cards went as well as it could have. But there was a slight issue with the verification process. All the bidders had been properly verified. Everyone was a person Dan or Kevin knew personally, or had been verified with their ID. Dan had no incentive to let in troll bidders, as if their auction was known as a sham, his reputation would be affected. Kevin, on the other hand, he had every incentive to manipulate the price of the card by artificially inflating the price by bidding against other people, and as he was allowed to let anyone in that he personally knew, what was to stop him from placing fake bids on his own card? And that's exactly what happened. The deleted user, aka Blue Oreo, wasn't Kevin himself but a friend of his. During the auction, Blue Oreo would bid against Rafa 3776, driving up the price from 20.2k to an extra 10.3k. As without Blue Oreo bidding on the card, there appeared to be no one else bidding on it, and would have most likely stayed at 20k. Funnily enough though, Kevin might have been able to extract more money out of Rafa 776, as Rafa later revealed he had missed a 30-minute interval and was willing to go all the way to 80k. But regardless, even if Blue Oreo ended up winning, this still wasn't an issue, as this scenario would also benefit both of them. Blue Oreo didn't exactly have 30.5k lying around, so their plan consisted of reselling the card, and that any profit made would be split between the two 50-50, with the original 30.5k being given to Kevin. Now maybe this plan would have worked, but in this reality, we'll never know. Because all of this previous information was actually all private, it was only known between Kevin and Blue Oreo. Later on, after revealing that Blue Oreo had no way to pay Kevin, he informed Dan of his plan. Dan would provide this information to a handful of high-end vintage collectors in a private group chat. However, from the group chat, this information ended up getting leaked to a Facebook group called Yu-Gi-Oh! Drama Center, where the conspiracy between Kevin and Blue Oreo was revealed. This of course ended up feeding the idea that the card was ultimately nothing more than just a fake. The people were already distrusting of an auction being hosted on Discord, which this event would confirm for them. Ultimately, this leak disrupted Kevin's plan and caused any plans of reselling the card to become incredibly difficult. Due to the legitimacy of the card being heavily questioned, and a loss of trust that a similar event wouldn't be pulled again. So now Kevin was left with a card where the buyer had no way of paying him, so with no other options, he set up another auction on May 7th, 2021, with the starting bid at 10k. And with all the bad traction he received with the entire process, Kevin's credibility was through the drain. The eBay auction ended with the final price of 23.6k, 6.4k less than what Rafa was willing to pay for in the Discord auction. And guess what? The first place buyer also never had the cash to pay for it, so Kevin ended up being stuck with the card. Again, Kevin tried to resell the card, but the winner of this second auction also was fake. So Kevin eventually gave up trying to resell the card on eBay, and for nearly 3 years, it vanished from the public eye. Then out of nowhere, it resurfaced on an auction site called Rare Candy, listed at a staggering 150k. What is less known more privately, however, is that Kevin did manage to get the card sold, Eventually, Dan would later receive messages from employees at PSA, BGS, and CGC inquiring about the card, and one of those such employees from CGC would end up flying out to see Kevin personally and inspect the card. After the card was revealed to be real by the CGC employee, it was bought by them, where the card still rests to this day. Whilst I can't give an exact figure for the final sale price, what I can say is that the price of the card ended up being in the lower end of 5 figures, substantially less than what Kevin would have received if he never interfered with the auction. So where does that leave with us today? From all the knowledge that's available, the chances of the card being true lean towards more likely than not, given that it was verified by multiple experts at PSA, and a final buyer who was also a CGC employee, it would appear that yes, the card is more likely to be real than fake. Of course, there's also the margin of error for the card to be fake, but given the number of authentication experts that have verified the card, the outcome is less likely. The situation surrounding the numbering of the card also lends itself to be too precise to be a fake card. If Kevin did decide to create a counterfeit card of MF03 Cyberdragon, why wouldn't he decide to make it line up with the existing no numbering? Making the card match up with the established numbering would have made the card appear more consistent with the limited public data available, and would have drawn less scrutiny. Deviating from the no numbering would only raise unnecessary suspicion in an already suspicious discovery. This leads me to believe that the likelihood of Cyberdragon being fake less of a possibility. The fact that Kevin also found an Avion, which was not on the public lists and was also inconsistent with the publicly known numbering, also is another factor that we have to consider. Similarly, for a scammer, it wouldn't make sense to find a card that wasn't even on the list, and the fact that it was MF03 001, which made way more sense than this spot being occupied by Wink Rebo, given that it fit right next to the other elemental heroes. What I propose instead, purely as speculation, is that Kevin may have had some kind of access to these cards before they ever made out into circulation. Maybe there were samples, maybe they were held back during the production run, or maybe they came from someone connected to the printing or packaging process. It's just a theory. It explains the presence of these incredibly rare cards in pristine condition, a bit more realistically than them simply sitting in a childhood closet for over 15 years, without anyone realizing their significance. This would have made more sense, and also would have allowed Kevin to reveal the presence of these cards to the world, without also exposing himself to any questions about how he acquired the cards, or the certain legal ramifications that may come with how he obtained the cards that weren't ever meant to be sold to the public. According to one Facebook thread, a user claimed they had contacted Sears a while ago, inquiring about the Cyberdragon toy. Allegedly, the Cyberdragon toy was sold exclusively from Sears, but there never existed their Cyberdragon toy packaged along with the card. Assuming this information is true, this again would lead to the theory that the origin of this card came from an inside source, whether that connection came from Kevin himself, someone he knew at Mattel, or even a parent of his childhood friend who might have worked in the factory. Ultimately, we just don't know. Again, to be clear, what I'm about to say falls squarely into the territory of rumors, but I felt that was worthy enough to mention. Based on talking to various sources and digging through obscure corners of the internet, there are whispers of black market groups where incredibly rare, unreleased toys and cards are quietly traded. These groups supposedly deal in things like cancelled Mattel products, items that never hit store shelves, including a Tempest figure I mentioned earlier, and some of the stories claim that sealed, unreleased toys exist with their cards still packed inside. Others mention the remaining MF03 cards, and the most surprising rumor, that an entire uncut sheet of MF03 cards might exist somewhere out there. According to secondhand sources, there may even exist other MF03 Cyberdragons out there that just haven't been revealed publicly. One persistent rumor suggests that one of them might even be in Germany, but again, none of this has been confirmed in any way, and for now, just remains to be a rumor. For the majority of my time doing research is how we might never really know about the Mattel cards. Ironically, Kevin Lee finding 3 cards which solved the mystery led to more questions than answers. How exactly did this copy of Cyberdragon exist? Why have we found Cyberdragon but not Wink Rebo, Ancient Gear Guardian, or Black Cluster Soldier? And if Kevin's story is accurate, how did his childhood friend manage to acquire all these cards in the first place? Many of these questions won't ever be answered, unless someone comes out with insider knowledge of what exactly went down with the promo cards and the toys. But hey, who knows? Maybe in another 13 years, I'll be making another video on how a Reddit user found an MF03 Black Cluster Soldier buried in his closet. Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. I haven't really done a video like this yet, and I've really enjoyed the process quite a lot. I'm open to doing more deep dive on interesting stories within the Yu-Gi-Oh community, and already have a couple ideas, so make sure you comment them down below. Don't forget to use my Raid Shadow Legends link in the description, or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses for new players with 2 epic champions.